I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. It's a beautiful day here in Minnesota. I hope it's beautiful everywhere else in the world as well. Well, we've got a great program. I always call our conversations, our objective is to present a robust conversation, and we are in alignment with that mission today with two great guests, and I think great information that we'll be sharing. Also have the fortune to have my colleague along with me co-piloting the program, W.D. Foster Graham, who is the book review editor for Insight News, who's an author, entrepreneur, and just an all-around excellent human being. Brother W.D., how you doing?
Hi, Al. It's been a great Black History Month, and it's great to be here one more time.
It really is. I want to ask you about the event you just did this weekend. Before I do that, I want to remind our viewers and listeners, no matter where you are, we're streaming on like 5 platforms, 2 YouTube platforms, the one for Black Press USA, the Black Press of America, and the Insight News YouTube platform. We're streaming on Twitter. We're streaming on Facebook for Black Press USA and Facebook for Insight News. And we're streaming on LinkedIn. And no matter how you're connecting, we value and appreciate you, but we also are asking you to help us grow our subscribers. And the platform that we're looking for subscribers in and on is the YouTube Insight News MN. So if you get a minute before the show is over, or take a second, jump off wherever you are. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, jump onto YouTube Insight News MN and click onto the program, the live program, click subscribe. That way you get notices every time we go live. And if you will, click like and click share. We are north of 600. We are looking to get 1,000 subscribers, and each subscriber is important to us. So if you are a subscriber, potentially one, or have friends or networks that ought to be involved in this kind of content, we'd appreciate your help. You subscribe first of all. Secondly, share this with your friends and your colleagues, your networks. Invite them to subscribe as well. Well, speaking of books, WD, you had an amazing project this past week, I think. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Al. Well, last Saturday, I had the privilege and the honor of being the host and the MC for the We Are Wordsmiths event at St. Peter's AME Church, and where we brought a diverse range of authors with their guests so they could share their work, do presentations, share their stories. It was a beautiful turnout for both the guests as well as the authors, because so many guests had no idea that we had so many Black authors, and this was an opportunity for them to engage. And we're actually looking forward to having next year our second event, and Al, thank you for the term wordsmiths, because it fit the evening perfectly. Because if we don't share our stories, who will?
That's right. And so speaking of that, I want to always, like you, encourage people to journal, to capture their story, capture their truth, and to believe that what they think and what they feel, not just believe, but to know what they think and what they feel, what they are looking at and how they look at it, all of that is important. And the viewpoint that they have is as important as anybody else's on the planet. And so I just encourage all of us to value our sensibility, value our feelings, value our expectations and our hopes, our dreams, value our experiences, even our defeats and failures, value them as lessons and stepping stones as we each continue to pursue becoming, evolving into our best selves. I tell people this, I'm happy to be, and I call myself, WD, a New World African, an African in the New World. That's a term I got from this brother named Dr. Rex Nettleford, who was a celebrated philosopher and arts leader in Jamaica. But I heard him say it, and it just rang in my ears and rang in my soul. I said, that's who I am. I'm an African in the new world. Because I claim Africa, but I'm here, and that's just how you link it up. So the question is, how do you value your epiphanies, your stories? And if the point is, if you don't do it, nobody else will, and you'll be a footnote in somebody else's story. So anyway, that's what's so important about what you're doing as an author, and also facilitating other people coming to their power, their superpower as documenters of their everyday. And that leads us to understanding that our ordinary is magnificent. What we take for granted is really grand, and we simply have to sit back and meditate and think, and just examine the power of the simple moments that we experience day by day. And boy, will we be changed, energized, and on fire. That's what I think. That's my sermon for the day.
Hey,
I'm gonna stop there. Let's bring our guest in, because I'm setting this up, I think, to talk to our guest, William Hayden Smith, who is a bivocational preacher, now serving as a pastor while continuing to work for the city of Minneapolis. Brother Bill Smith is here. Bill Smith, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
About you from your notes. Married for 34 years to Audrey Smith, and have 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren. And you are a licensed preacher since 1966 or so. 99 ordained as a itinerant deacon in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Graduated from Luther Seminary in St. Paul in 2005 with a master's in divinity. Got a itinerant elder status at the Chicago Annual Conference for the 4th Episcopal District of the AME Church in October of 2005. You served on the clergy staff at St. James AME in St. Paul, beginning in 1997 under the consecutive pastorates of Reverend Herbert Armstrong and Reverend Randolph Bailey and Reverend Byron Moore. And you've provided interim pastoral services at St. Mark AME in Duluth in 2006 under presiding elder Alphonse Reff. Brother Reff, that's an amazing leader, amazing pastor, and who I know him personally, great man. And you've served on the clergy staff of St. James in Minneapolis under our great sister, Pastor Marshall Holman in 2007. And you've been appointed by Bishop John R. Bryant as the first pastor of Lily of the Valley AME Church in Apple Valley. That in 2008, you got a doctorate of ministry in biblical preaching from Luther Seminary. And in May of 2011, and right now you're celebrating your 4th anniversary as pastor of Lily of the Valley. Welcome, brother, to the Conversation with Al McFarlane and with W.D. Foster Graham.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Good to be with my old compadre, W.D. We go back, I don't even know how far, but we're not gray back then.
No, we go back to our days with the sounds.
Yes, back to the mid-70s. Yep, that's back in the mid-70s. That was around the time I married Audrey, and that now we are heading around our 48th anniversary.
Hey.
Isn't that amazing?
It's good to be here with you guys, and I'm really grateful for this platform, grateful for your efforts to expand on what we know about each other and what we know about ourselves. Because at this point in our lives, we got a lot to reflect on, and that need not die with us.
That's right.
We need to pass that around, keep it going.
Well, what's on your mind today?
I wanted to talk to you about, my time with the city of Minneapolis. I got started up here in about 1965. And it was interesting in that the reason my father brought us up here was because all the rioting and violence and so forth with civil rights movement in Chicago at the time. He thought it best for us to be out of the picture in Chicago. People were getting hurt. And he brought us up. We bought some property up in northern Minnesota. And up by Emily, Minnesota, I started up there in about 1965, 66. And that's when I got started.
Where is Emily? Where is that?
Emily is 148 miles north of Minneapolis.
Near what big town?
It's about 40 miles from Brainerd.
Okay.
It's also about 40 miles from Aiken. We're kind of in a triangle up there.
Okay.
But I started up there. That's where I first learned about Minnesota. We'd never been here before. And obviously going from a big city to a rural area, which is exactly what we did, it was like learning to live all over again. We were in a resort area, learning how to fish and swim and water ski and all that good stuff. Good old South Side Chicago boy in a brand new place. During that time, or around the time I was at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, which is where I met my wife, Audrey. And she kind of snatched me sideways, and I ain't been right since. And but I just couldn't walk away from her. She was just a blessing. And we started our journey at that school, did some time up north learning how to do carpentry work, and came down, got a job with City of Minneapolis in I think that was 86 when I started with City of Minneapolis as a housing inspector. Mm-hmm. But I had already had about 9 years of heavy construction work with what was known then as the Dayton Hudson Corporation. They built Southdale and all that. Our offices were in the IDS building. And I was a young executive, didn't know what I was doing. That was my first opportunity to work construction and also work among some white folks who I didn't know, and they didn't know me. And it was interesting because when I got there was probably about another dozen black folks on the staff, and we kept passing each other in the hallway. But it wasn't until after about a month or so we all met together in the cafeteria for coffee, found out they hired us, and we all started on the same day. And here we each of us is thinking that the other ones have been there for a long time. And that's when I first got a little peek as to how this city deals with issues of race. Mm-hmm. They kind of grab up a bunch of brown-skinned folks, throw them out the situation, and see how it works. I'm grateful for that opportunity because I had to learn how to swim in the deep water. And so I was dealing with construction on a commercial basis. And I learned a lot from Dayton Hudson and got my job first starting in inspections with Southside Neighborhood Housing Services. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember them.
Of course.
And I worked with them for a year or so and moved to the management of the Sabathany Community Center. They wanted me in charge of converting it from a high school into a community center. Since I had the experience with the commercial construction, Dayton Hudson, along with the McKnight Foundation and a few others that were involved with that, brought me onto that project where I was for a few years, managing that, and I eventually...
That's the building on 38th or the building on
38th and Clinton, yeah.
And that was after the first building on 31st and I think Blaisdell, correct?
Yes,
so
sir.
Sabathany and the Afro Center were both on 31st and Blaisdell at first.
Yes, that's exactly right. Working with Clarissa Walker and James... I can't remember James' last name, who he was the executive director out there at Sabathany. Both of them have passed on now.
Yeah, James, I see him. His name will pop up in a minute, but yeah, he was a veteran. He was a veteran too.
Yes, he was. Yes. But I got an opportunity to work with and be introduced to my what would soon be my new boss. Oh my goodness, I've forgotten his name too, but I started as a housing inspector and he was director of housing inspections for the city of Minneapolis. I started as an inspector, but I realized my expertise was in construction, not in housing. But I worked with the housing department for about 4 years, and I got exposed to the construction division of inspections for the city of Minneapolis. And while I was there, I learned the ropes, and I had to figure out my way to get over to the construction side. And that's where I first realized that you got to be on the inside to be able to navigate your way through to any position of authority or impact within the city of Minneapolis. You don't get to just hire on straight from the street and you come in. It's almost as though they have to indoctrinate you for a while before they're going to cut you loose with doing anything directly for the city. So I understood that. I put in my time. I got certified by the state of Minnesota as a certified building inspector. And I also was certified with the national construction inspections. And I got that first job as a building inspector. And as I came in there, I realized that there was very few people of color involved with any aspect of construction, unless you wanted to do the dirty work, carrying the boxes, unloading the trucks, all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But when it came to management, when it came to any position of authority throughout the construction industry, and that would be back in the mid 80s, early 90s, you just couldn't get in. It was locked up. It was pretty much all fraternal. And if you didn't know somebody, you weren't going to get introduced to who had the key to the door. And I just kept pushing. I was interested. I was intrigued by that. And especially after I realized that these were jobs that they basically had to throw you out of. Once you got hired and passed your probation, right, you could stay there as long as you wanted to and have pension, have good benefits with health care and so forth, life insurance, all those different things, sick leave, paid sick leave. A lot of people weren't getting those things. Mm-hmm. And I had a desire to get some of my brothers and sisters from the community to take advantage of some of these jobs because there was a lot of turnover. Mm-hmm. And I could not do it. I tried to get people involved, and they were lacking different things that they had to get on the outside before they could get on the inside. Mm-hmm. And even I didn't know all the tricks to the trade as far as breaking through that barrier. Once I discovered it, I got loud and started passing that information out like candy. And a number of people tried to come in, and some of them did make it, but not with the city of Minneapolis. A good friend of mine, Maurice Plunkett, got on as the building inspector over at St. Louis Park. Mm-hmm. I had some other folks who got on with inspections out in Bloomington and out in the northern suburbs, but nobody with city of Minneapolis. And it pretty much stayed that way until I got to the point that I was hired on as the manager for inspections for the city of Minneapolis, which was a big move. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get there until I was about 65. Mm-hmm. And I said, now this is interesting that I've managed to get to a position of authority and I'm almost too old to keep working. They managed to keep me knocking at the back door till I finally did get in. But once I got in and I started to move forward, I realized that there were internal gates and internal doors that remained locked unless you knew the right people, unless you could do what they wanted you to do. It was just not a level playing field. And we started having different meetings with the Blacks who were in various departments. About 6 or 7 years ago, they started an organization that was specifically for us. And the people were younger. By then, of course, I was approaching my 70s. And I remember coming to it. There was a lot of crying, a lot of people who were upset with the things that they were finding and the barriers they were finding as far as moving ahead. A lot of young people who got started in different areas of the city, such as the community planning and economic development coming into public works department, coming into inspections, who were getting frustrated because they were in the door, but they couldn't move forward. And once they realized that they had to get all these other outside qualifications and certifications, it was discouraging. And here they thought they were there, and they found out, no, they were 5 or 6 years away. And I tried to encourage as many people as I could, but a lot of people didn't want to put in the time. They were already discouraged. And at that point, I was discouraged, and I was getting old. And I said, I've got to retire. But once I started the retirement process and I looked over my shoulder, I realized that there were no people of color coming up behind me, zero. There was a good friend of mine who is a Hispanic lady, who is a good friend and also a very qualified district supervisor with the city of Minneapolis. And she's run into some of the same problems moving forward. And it got to be the point where they were actually sabotaging my efforts to hire minorities at all with the city of Minneapolis. I did manage to get 4 hired. And once I got those 4 hired, the murmurings, that's when the murmurings started. I was getting too much. I was getting too much, moving ahead too fast and making too much progress. And at that point, all of a sudden, I was banned from hiring, which caught me totally by surprise. At one point, I went to go and follow the regular computer process to advertise for a job and get people in to, go through and interview for different open positions. I couldn't even get in the computer. And I checked all around, and nobody knew why, and nobody knew how to fix it. And I was kind of they let me know, you're not getting in there to hire any more people. Right around that time, I had a heart attack.
Well, let's go back and go over some of those things you've mentioned so far. Quite fascinating. I'm interested at the end of this question in having you sort of make an assessment about how much change has actually occurred and how much change is still needed in the city of Minneapolis as far as their hiring practices are concerned. And I'll say that because the city, the county, the state, all of them have been talking almost in a hand-wringing fashion about the changing demographics. We know that like every other city in America, our city is going to be experiencing a browning, more African, Latino, Asian people than ever before. We know that the white population is shrinking, dying, retiring, moving, and the cities, the managers saying, we know we got to find somebody. What are we going to do? In history, I believe that opened doors for new immigrants from Norway, Sweden, Germany, anywhere Europe, anywhere white. And that also kept us in the surplus pool.
Yes.
If they had to get one of us, then there'd be an opportunity because they couldn't find somebody white. That's what I think. That's what I observed as a journalist and reporter. And the business side of that is that while they were telling you they wanted to hire more people of color, then freezing you out of the system to do it, they would tell an Al McFarlane, we don't advertise. We know the situation is changing, but we don't think it's worth telling your people in your newspaper about the jobs we have in the city of Minneapolis. And that, my friend, has not changed. And it's not changed at the county, nor has it changed at the state level yet. We're working to try to break those doors down. But what's your feeling about where we are now, how much change has actually happened, how much more must be done?
It has changed at a snail's pace. And part of the reason is because white folks have been very scared, and that's been from all of my experience with the city, going back all the way back to the 70s and the 80s, been very afraid that people of color were coming to take their jobs and that they were going to be frozen out and never be allowed back in. What they fail to realize is that this city, this part of the country, is at the hub of an area that is growing like crazy, and there's no way they could run out of jobs. But they're it's like people of color start getting too close. And as we started knocking at the door to get into management positions to where decisions could be made as far as publicizing about jobs, publicizing about projects, letting the general public know that there was room for people of color. And here's the way you go about doing it. When we started getting close to those positions, that's when all of a sudden the freezing out process kicked in. And it was interesting because, they seem to have a way of working together without saying anything out loud.
Right, they do.
And we can turn around and look in every door you knock. If there's a white person on the other side, they know not to answer.
That's right.
And I'm trying to figure out, well, who put the memo out to these folks to keep us lower? Well, in the meantime, the clock is still ticking. And I found out the hard way. You can get up every day and you can keep on putting up with the mess that you got to put up with. And you can keep making changes as long as you can affect those changes. But at some point, time takes its toll on you. Start losing your eyesight. Start coming up with kidney problems, diabetes. I've been diabetic for the whole time I've worked for the city of Minneapolis, almost 60 years now. And God has blessed me to keep on pushing on. But diabetes is a hard disease to control.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with the sicknesses along the way. Well, all that stuff goes into a big boiling pot. That means automatically that progress and movement forward is going to be slow and at a snail's pace. Then the people who are going to survive are the people who are going to be able to outlive and simply keep on slugging through the mess that is there. And the people who are in power are going to pass along the same authority and same power to the next generation, which is also moving to be all white. And some of the problems, at least in the construction part, in order to be able to move ahead, you've got to be properly certified and authorized. And that means you, number one, have to get into the system. And then by the time you go through the school and take the tests and get the certifications and so forth, that's 4 or 5 years down the line. And you still haven't broken into the industry. And then when you break in, you're at the lowest level. And once you're at the lowest level and you start coming in, you have hours and days you have to put in and log in before you're approved for the next possible position. And you add up all of those things from the time that somebody starts to the time of getting into management, you're probably a good 10 years. And people nowadays, they don't want to have to deal with that. That's a long time to wait for a $100,000 job, especially when you can find that in the public sector much quicker than that at a much younger age. So I've seen progress. It's been at a snail's pace. It continues to be at a snail's pace, and even almost cut off altogether at this point because there's so much fear that people of color are taking away too much of the ground that white folks have already claimed. Now I don't know if that makes sense to you because
no, you're right on the money. And you also resonating with our listeners and viewers. Brother DJ in the comments said Reverend Dr. Bill is the GOAT, greatest of all time. So that's somebody that knows your work, and wants to tell everybody who you are.
All right.
Another viewer, Spider-Man 725, said this man is describing the system of racism and white supremacy. And he also goes on, I think that's what he says. So Spider-Man, thank you for your comment. DJ, thank you for your comment. If you have more comments, keep them coming. It's important that we have this conversation. Bill, how old were you when your family moved to northern Minnesota?
We came here in 1966, so I would have been 14 years old.
So what's cool is that my family came to Minnesota from Kansas City, not Chicago, in 1965.
Okay.
So other end of the state. But I'm thinking our experiences and stories are so parallel that they both culminate with you and me both being in Minneapolis and St. Paul and both involved in both professional and activist and community building work over the entire arc of our lives and our careers. That's what I think is important. And go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember back at that time going up north, all we had was a little small country store that we used to go to get our eggs and bacon and everything. And I came up here from Chicago, man. I was looking for my pork rinds and French fries in a paper bag and all the stuff we used to be able to get down the street. And I loved sardines. I'm telling you, that shows how old in country I am. Sardines and canned oysters. And I remember getting up north and looking for them, and they didn't have them. Mm-hmm. They did have King Oscar Kipper snacks. But I was looking through and I found a can of, I can't remember the name of the company, but they were called Niggerhead oysters.
Yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah, I've heard of them.
You've heard of them?
I've heard of them. I have. I certainly have.
I looked at that can and I said, where am I?
What? And it's like the air there. Look, we're going to have you come back and spend some more time because I have a bunch of questions for you. But I want to bring our next guest in. And if you would hang out with us well for the next conversation, because everything is related. It's all tied together. And we're all on a path. And that's a path of being and a path of becoming. My next guest is Dr. Alecia Mobley. And she grew up in a military family. She's lived all over the world, from Panama and Central America. She lived in Fort Rucker, Alabama, and more places. She'll tell about that. But she says her love for writing and journaling started as an early age, and it was the primary method for her staying in contact with others during transitions to new cities and spaces. She's written a book. Her debut book explores the feelings, emotions, lessons, and stressors that come along with finding both your purpose and destinations along the path of life. She's an administrator in special education and no stranger to advocacy and creating and sustaining spaces where healing and access are imperative. She uses this as a grounding tenet in her book. And, she's a graduate of Florida A&M University and the University of Minnesota, where she earned the Doctorate of Education Administration. She's got two, she says, precocious teenagers here with her in Minnesota. Dr. Mobley, so good to see you. Thank you for being here. And let me say that we have an extra added blessing because one of the people that know you quite well that joined the call on, we'll have her by telephone, I think. This makes this conversation even more exciting. Her name is Ursula Johnson Humes, and she's an elder in your family, in our community, joining us, I think, from Boston. Yeah. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's my Aunt Ursula. Yes.
Sister Ursula Johnson Humes, thank you for getting the short notice call. Before the show, Dr. Mobley was talking about some wonderful comments you made. And I said, well, call her up. Get her on the phone. Let's get her in this program. So thank you for being available and amenable. Dr. Mosley, let me start with you, though. Talk about your book. What's the book about?
Yes. So first of all, I want to say thank you again, Mr. McFarlane and WD, and to my auntie Ursula, who joined. I'm so excited and even more nervous now, of course, but so grateful that you could join. I just want to take time in this space to say thank you so much for having me here today. So my book is a collection, like you said, a collection of journal entries over the last 20 years. And so I grew up in a military family, like you said, and what I did all the time was write. I'm dating myself a little bit because we had pen pals back in the day. We would write, even if you were in a different country, we were writing. Technology was different then. And so I developed a love for writing, and this is 20 years of talking to God. And so I just would write like God on any subject and every subject, even when I was little. God, why this and why that, and ask a lot of questions. So I'm so grateful to share my journey with everyone, and also just my experiences along the way.
We have a graphic of the book, Cooper, to put up. Can we show that?
Yes.
What are we looking at?
Yes. So my book entitled Conversations with God While Sipping Your Tea is my first book. And this is me at the Minnesota Black Authors Expo, an amazing event and organization that I was invited to and had an amazing time. And one of the reasons people ask about tea a lot, growing up, just traditionally, historically, and culturally, tea is very important in my family. And so a lot of conversations with my elders, grandmas, aunties happen over a cup of tea. And so that's why the theme is in the book as well.
Well, the notion of a conversation with God is a bold idea for writing, I think. I think everybody secretly and privately has the feeling and understands when a person decides to describe his or her experience as a conversation with God, but it's the rare person that looks so deeply into that relationship that is able to define it in those simple terms, declaring that that's in fact what you were having is conversations with God. That's bold. So tell me about that. Why that, and what made that experience so compelling, so unique, and so worthy of being in the title of a book?
So my conversations with God have spanned, like I said, over the last 20 years. And I sat down and started reflecting on all the things that I had learned and the ways I had grown, and just laughed and cried over journal entries. I actually was moving, Mr. McFarlane, and I found a box where I just threw all my journals in. They were kind of all over the place. And a surprise in the box was I found a journal from 6th grade. That I had put in the box, and I was reading and going, "Oh my goodness!" And so, not all those entries were to God, obviously, but I was like, "Wow! Like, this is something that's healing for me. This is something that's important to me, and this is something that I want to share." Originally, I was like, "I don't know if I want to share," but I came to share because it's important to me to also share testimonies and stories. And in our culture, stories are so rich and so powerful and so meaningful. And so I thought about this as a way to share stories. And for future generations, I originally did not think it would be a book that everyone would read. So this is also practice in vulnerability for me. And so just from sharing my stories, people said, you should put them in a book. And so I turned it into it's actually a devotional.
Well, the key word here is vulnerability, I think. And I think that had to be the emotion you experienced when your aunt called you and said she'd seen your book or had your book. What were your feelings first? Then I'm going to ask Sister Ursula to talk about how she encountered the book, the story, and the narrative, and what she told you. But what was your trepidatious feelings as you anticipated talking to your auntie?
So what I'll say is, like, one of the things too is, when you're doing a project or you're doing something that's really important to you and you share it with your family, you don't really know how it's gonna go, and so they're very personal stories, and so my Aunt Ursula called me. And she started sharing, and I was like, I hope she liked it. 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 And she began to just pour into me. And it was such a blessing. I was in tears. And so she said, and I was telling her I was going to be on this show. And she said, well, let me tell you something. If this 69-year-old woman can learn something from that book, anyone can. And I was just like, oh my goodness, thank you, Auntie. Thank you. And so once again, just, when you hear, right, that something that you're connected to, or your conversations or testimonies and or struggles and the things that you've overcome bless someone else, and the folks that it blesses mean the world to you, it is a very special thing.
Well, I was saying Ursula. I hear you saying Ursula. Teach me how to say her name properly.
Well, we're Panamanian with a little bit of Jamaican, so
Okay.
that's like the little twang that we put on it. So I call her Auntie Ursula.
Auntie Ursula. And may I call you Auntie Ursula?
Yes, you may.
All right, welcome to the program. So tell me what happened when you saw the book, and what your feelings were, what your feelings are, and what you told your niece that lifted her spirit and helped her sit in the healing that she was both experiencing and providing to the universe by dint of her relationship, her conversations with God.
What was interesting to me that just like her, I've always spoken to God. I always had conversations with him. But there are certain things that were that I didn't think were that important and minute that I saw that she would, just one example was, thank you for that new freezer and thank you for the air condition. And I'm like, I said, excuse me, I should be saying thank you for that too. Why am I not thanking God for those, what we will consider smaller things? It doesn't have to be a big issue, but these are necessities that we have, and he has.
I think we lost the connection for a second. We'll probably get it back in a second. Just come back in when you're there again, Auntie Ursula. So, Dr. Alecia, take up from there. You know, what are the impressions that you get from your auntie?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things, I think she'll be joining us soon. One of the things she mentioned, obviously, is the gratitude and the gratefulness. And hopefully she'll be able to share about the salt. There's a particular chapter that talks about salt and how salt is connected to, or may be connected to relationships, and how it's important to remember that, especially when relationships come together, that salt comes together. And then when there's a separation, then the salt is separated. And so that's a visual that I talk about that my aunt will share hopefully soon. So those were two of the things as well.
Cooper, is she back yet? Do we have her back in? We lost her for a second. I think so. So Auntie Ursula, can you take up from there? Talk about salt. Maybe you might have hit your mute button by mistake, or now, yeah, there we go. Try it now. As we see you, we're not hearing you. Okay, well, maybe you and Cooper can figure that out offline there. Yeah. So, question, you mentioned Panama, and I mentioned it in the brief. What about where have you lived? Talk about being in a military family. Where were you born, and where have you lived?
So I was born right outside of Birmingham, Alabama. So my parents met in the military in Alabama. My mom was coming from Boston via Panama. And my dad is born and raised in Florida. So they met in Alabama. And then after that, we moved to, I have to think, so many places, Hawaii, and then Panama, then South Carolina, Germany, New Jersey, and then back to Alabama. And then I went to school. I went to Florida A&M in Florida. So, and now I live in Minnesota.
Do you consider yourself Afro-Latino, Afro-Panamanian, or do you consider yourself Panamanian at all? What's the Panama connection for you personally?
So my mom was born and raised in Panama. And her mom was born in Jamaica. So a lot of folks helped work on the Panama Canal and moved from different areas of Jamaica to Panama as well. So, and then families would move together to the United States. And so there's families that moved from Panama to Boston with my family that we've known for generations. So it's a pretty cool story.
Well, that's my story as well. My father, his dad is Jamaican born. My grandmother and grandfather, Jamaicans who moved to Cuba to work and try to make a better living. They stayed there almost a generation. Then they moved back to Jamaica. But my father and his sisters and brothers, except for the youngest, were all born in Cuba. My father's, some of his brothers and cousins went to Panama. And so that's a connection. We've got McFarlane's in Panama and in Cuba, but the same story, the same immigration story. My father came to this country in World War II.
Yes. Very similar story. Yes.
What does living around the world do for your view of the world and your view of your own self as a human being, as a unique creation? And WD, I see you nodding. Yeah, jump in whenever you want to, man. I'll keep talking.
We're talking about it all. Well, one of the things that it always has done is just expanded my view of the world and the people of the world. And so when you grow up, and I don't remember Alabama as much, but I remember being in Panama, and I remember being around my grandfather and aunts and uncles and cousins there. That was one of my first memories. And I don't remember necessarily like birthday parties, but I remember how I felt there. So I remember in Panama, I felt like there was always family around and always food around. I remember those things. And so that's a part of my culture too that's important. Food and family being around and celebrating a lot. The other thing that I've learned too, just being all these different places and learning, is when you grow up in the military, something I say all the time is even your education is so different, right? And so the private's daughter goes to school with the general's daughter. And so you have a school to go to, and everybody is a part of the school and a part of the community. And you have one commissary, what we call a grocery store in military life. And you have maybe one shopette, which is kind of like the convenience store. And so you build a sense of community living in the military, growing up in the military, that I didn't necessarily see or didn't feel the same way, even when I came to the United States. And so I've lived across the world and visited places while I was there, and I have appreciation for people. The other thing it does is it dispels myths fast, right? And so when you hear things, you're like, that's not true, because I've been there. I've seen that. I left Germany in 1990 with the Berlin Wall collapsing, and actually was there and held it in my hand. And I think that experience teaches you a lot about what does it mean to be separated from family? What does that mean, to have all those pieces? And so, and then you move back to Alabama in the deep South, and then you feel what you feel there, and you feel the connections. So I can say, in terms of relating it back to the book too, like my journal entries spanned most of those places. Right. And so learning and growing and being appreciative of the folks and the community and everyone who makes up the community is something I've learned for sure.
Speaking of which, we love our viewers would love to hear an excerpt from your book. And I noticed something in the beginning. You have what's called a scriptural text, and then you also have a compass point. So we'd love to hear about those too.
Okay. And just for the audience, what I have done when I've been reading my book is I'll ask someone to give me a number from 1 to 14, and then I'll read to them that chapter. And every time I do this, it connects to them in a certain way. So I'm hoping it does the same. So WD gave me the number 7 before the call. So I'm going to read 7 right now. So the verse, it'll be a little abbreviated too. The verse is Psalms 116, 8-9. And here's the compass point. And the compass point kind of sets the tone for where I was in that stage of life. So this is about family. So connected to what we're talking about today. I love my little brother. He is the smartest out of the 3 of us, and really never had to work hard at anything. He breezed through things easily, especially school. I always thought he was bored a lot. He's also the youngest, so kind of spoiled in my opinion. He overcame a great deal in college, and I will forever be grateful and proud of him. At a low point a couple years ago, he made some really bad choices, and that led him to being arrested. This is the prayer that I prayed, scared, sad, trying to figure out what to do to support my brother and my family. God told me to pray. Throughout this ordeal, my brother was showered with favor and support from every place possible. Through this, God told me how his mercy really works and how deliverance is connected to redemption and protection. You should see him now. All I got to say is, but God.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
yes. So I don't know if I have time to read the prayer.
You do.
But what I will.
Of course. Yeah,
I do.
please.
Okay. Yeah, so there's no date. So sometimes I would just journal and just write on little pieces of paper and stick them in. So there was no date here. Here's my prayer. Lord, Father God, I come to you right now in the time of need, first asking for forgiveness from all that I've done. I'm tripping right now. I have so much going on in my head. There's so much going on. Father, I'm going to just claim victory right now, Lord. Lord, protect him, be with him. Angels cover him right now. Psalms 91, protection over him right now. Your word says, because he loves me, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me and I will answer him. I will be with him in the time of trouble. In Luke 12:2, it says, there is nothing that is concealed that will not be disclosed or hidden that will not be known. Thank you, Lord. I appreciate you. Be with him. Go to him. So that was my prayer that I wrote in a moment.
Awesome. Well, I'll put your system to test. The number in my mind is 11. So if I tell you 11, what are you going to tell me?
Okay. Healing, in parentheses, turtles, which happens to be my favorite animal. I don't know if that's connected to you. So the verse is Romans 8:28.
Okay.
And the compass point is, should I read it?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I love this one. Okay. So my daughter was involved in a horrific incident, which she was burned while playing on a treadmill. It was one of the most nerve-wracking times in my life. And through the pain, hurt, and lack of information, God whispered to me that she would be okay and that I should trust him. He also said that the burn would heal a lot faster than anyone thought. And it would be a reminder of how I was healing through the pain of abuse and hurt. A painful event, but with scars, healing would take place. I remember being upset with God, asking him, why didn't he just put me in her place? Or why couldn't the lesson have come in a different way? But it didn't. So that's a compass point. Mm-hmm. Now, if time I can read the prayer as well.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I thank God. Oh, there's a story. No date again. Lord, I thank God for your grace and mercy this week. I love you and I'm grateful for you. Thank you for all the blessings, the answered prayers, and all of the things that you've done. And I'm forwarding it just a little bit. I will be forever grateful. Bioderm is wonderful. It is working nicely and she is even excited about it. I've already claimed no skin grafting and I'm moving forward in that. We had a great weekend as well. The girls were amazing and I'm learning how to chill more. I probably could yell less too. Thank you, Lord, for sending people my way to talk to me about the girls as well. So the rest goes on to talk about my friends. But the story behind it is after she was burned, a lady at my church came and said, I work at an office and we have samples of this really expensive cream for burns. Do you want to try some? And so that ended up being something that helped heal her scars. So
amazing, just like that. And that's what was promised to you, and that's what was given.
Exactly.
Right? There we go. Exactly. Are you there? Do you hear us, or can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you now. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Well,
can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. So what's on your mind as you listen to this interview? Please share your thoughts and feelings. Take it anywhere you want to go.
Oh my goodness. When I spoke to Alecia, all I could remember is that I remember her from she was a baby. For her to come to this point where she's wrote a book that I learned quite a few things from. The example that she gives about the salt shaker, being two different salt shakers put together, and then when there's a divorce, God has to take his time basically and separate each grain. That was more understanding to me now because I'm also a divorcee. And I divorced over 30 years ago. And I'm just learning that now about the salt shaker. And like every not everyone else, but for myself, I had like some resentment. There was hurt. They were my kids, and the things that I had to do at the time to move
Yep.
forward. I went into a profession that no one expected me to go into. I became a police officer and then a detective prosecutor. So I was out there all the time. And my kids, from reading this book, I have to be even more grateful for my kids because all the time that I was out there working at different hours and they will just call me in, I could always count on my daughter and my son. They stayed in the house. I didn't hear anything that I had to go look for them. I'll come home tired and they will be right here. They will do their work, their homework, etc., etc. And I said, you know what? From reading this, I've never said thank you to my kids for that. And I also learned that from that book. And I learned also to let go. Let go and let God, because the healing will come. It doesn't matter how long it takes, because as my aunt says, what takes God, what is a minute to God is a long time to us.
That's right.
But it's just a minute to him.
That's right.
Indeed.
So I learned all of that from Alecia's book. And I'm saying, I'm 69. Excuse me? I am learning from my niece that I saw as a baby. And I am so proud of her. And I'm so happy for the insight that I take this book, especially when I go to my doctor's appointment or any appointment. It's always in my bag, and I share it with other people. So God bless her for that.
Fantastic.
I'm
How,
grateful.
how's your Spanish? You still use Spanish at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Pues
Absolutely.
debemos hablar en español por un poco. Yo soy medio cubano, y por eso he estudiado español y de vez en cuando tengo la oportunidad de usarlo y me gusta. Es un idioma tan hermoso, tan lindo. ¿Qué piensas?
Claro que sí. Me alegro de saber eso. Eso es excitante. Yo no sabía que usted hablaba español, pero yo todavía lo tengo. Yo vine a este país 14 años y todavía no se me ha olvidado el español.
Bueno, qué bueno. Well, we ran a story a few years ago by a Panamanian lawyer. We were developing a relationship, and he wrote a story about trenzas, right? There was a controversy in Panama about hair braids, Afro culture.
Yes.
And it was a big national story about what's acceptable. Do you have to have your hair straightened, or can you wear your hair in ways that reflect your culture? But that's an important discussion. Listen, Bill, are you still there? Give me a quick impression. We're almost at the end of the time here, but this is a wonderful conversation. I think it all ties together. What are your thoughts?
Man, I'm telling you. Well, for one thing, I want to try some of that food. As soon as she said that, I thought, "Oh my goodness, don't get me going on that." But we are one family, and I'm so grateful to hear the voices of my brothers and sisters. And as I am getting to be so much older, and I'm maybe not so much, but I'm thinking, why have we waited so long to have this conversation, or why have I waited so long? But you know what I'm realizing is that I have been one of my probably greatest stumbling blocks along the way, telling myself what I couldn't do and failing to reach out and really celebrate what I was already doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes.
all of us have made some great strides, especially considering all of the roadblocks and barriers along the way. But God has blessed us with long life in order that we might see the fruits of our labors and share the fruits of our labors. That's what I'm really excited about with this program, and I'm looking forward to being in communication with all of you down the line. I have always worried that I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to live that long, and it just has not worked out that way. I keep on going, and I feel good.
There we go.
I'm
Very
feeling
good.
It's a
good.
long way.
There we
It's a
go.
long way.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
Well, listen, we are out of time right now for this program, but this is the beginning. And I'm so
Yes.
glad to have this conversation with you, Dr. Alecia. So
Yeah.
honored to meet you, Auntie Ursula. Y debemos
Thank you.
hablar otra vez y otra vez y otra vez. Vamos a
Okay.
continuar hablando.
Okay.
And Brother Bill, thank you so much. As always, WD, thank you for your
Thank you.
curating these exciting programs. Excellent. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.